Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Randhawa, the founder and chief executive officer of the Southern California Food Allergy Institute. I'd like to welcome you to our fourth live event. This is one of many series where our goal was to kind of open up what this organization is to the rest of the food allergy community. And we welcome you once again. I think we have several hundred attendees. And I think the goal of today's 1 hour session is to try to mix and match a little bit of your questions and kind of your areas of interest. And also introduce to you some of the main leaders of our organization here at the Southern California Food Allergy Institute. So before we move into any kind of further specific questions, I'd like to introduce you to our team. We have Dr. Tracy Clark, Dr. Ripp, and Mia Spinelli, who is our lead practitioner. And I'm going to give them each a few minutes to kind of talk about themselves, what brought them to this organization, and obviously we'll then dive into some specific questions and go from there. Dr. Clark.
All right, good morning. And for some of you that might be coming from a different time zone, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Clark. I was born and raised in Northern California and came down to Southern California for school, education, residency, and so forth. To answer the question as far as what brought me here, the thing that brought me here actually was family. Some of you may know that I have a niece that's actually in the program. She was born with food allergy and eczema, and we as a family went through the same thing that a lot of families went through, trying to find answers as far as treatment. She was a rare enough case that she went beyond the normal medical treatment, and we did go to an allergist. We actually went to several allergists to try to help her. And year after year for her, it was really hard because they could tell us, they could do the testing, tell us she was allergic, tell us to avoid it, and give her steroids to cover up her skin. But there wasn't any other treatment options. There wasn't any other treatment that would help us actually treat the underlying problem and to treat her from the inside out until I found this program. And so, I mean, for us, it was a big change. I have been here going on now 4 years. So this is actually, I'm going into my 4th year here. And I am happy to report that my niece is about halfway through the program and doing really well. And I know that half the patients go through the program without any symptoms, but I can actually vouch for that because she has gone through quite well. I want to knock on wood, but for some of you that might be good at math or may ask, well, if I've been a part of this program for about 4 years and she's only halfway through her program, well, is that a really long course? Has she been in it for 4 years? And my answer to that would be no. Although length of treatment may vary based on specific patients, their allergy profile, and other factors, what actually happened was I didn't enroll her for the first 2 years. I didn't enroll her for the first 2 years because I needed to see it for myself. I needed to learn about it for myself, and I needed to trust the program for my family. I needed to be able to entrust my family with the program. And I believe that that's the reason a lot of you are here today, is because you too are trying to learn about our program and how you can help your family, and if this is something that you can trust to be a part of. So that answers your question.
Thank you, appreciate that. Look, it's an honest answer,
It's an honest answer.
And I appreciate that. No, I mean, this is something that takes time. I mean, as I built this program over all these years, I did it in small sequences, 25 patients, 100, 500, 1,000, everything was done in sets because you have to, it is proof of concept and you must get to that point. I think obviously now 10,000 plus patients in, I sleep a lot better at night, but again, it's a very serious responsibility with this type of work. So, yeah. Dr. Ripp.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ripp. I did my medical school at UC Irvine and then my pediatric training at the University of California, Irvine and Children's Hospital of Orange County. After my pediatric residency training, I spent a couple of years as a general pediatrician in Orange County. And I think what one of the things that was a difficult or frustrating aspect of my job is, my job is to help kids grow and thrive, and I wasn't able to fully support my patients who have food allergies. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, you had a reaction, let's go get you skin tested, here's an EpiPen, I know how to get you a free AviQ home delivery, and that was the extent of what I could do for my patients. So I had heard about the program because my pediatric training is in the area. And then similar to Dr. Clark, I also have a family connection to this program. My daughter also has food allergies, and I think this program does provide a lot of hope. It was pretty, it's something definitely to cope with when your daughter has food allergies, and knowing to read labels and seeing her go through a lot of reactions. It can definitely, gonna start crying. It can definitely be really heartbreaking. And so this program, I think, provides me a lot of hope, and I just want to be able to provide hope for families as well. And that's really a huge draw of why I am here working for this program.
Thank you, appreciate that. Mia.
Hi, I'm Mia Spinelli. I'm the lead nurse practitioner here. I'm originally from Haddonfield, New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I did nursing school and my nurse practitioner school at University of Pennsylvania. I worked at CHOP in the pulmonary unit. I worked with a lot of chronic illnesses, complex patients, and I knew that that's what I wanted to work with, is something that was a chronic illness that you saw improvement with over time. And the more time you spend in medicine, you realize that you can help things from getting worse, but it's hard to make things that much better. And it was amazing. Allergies is something that I don't think anyone was trying to make better ever. There wasn't a solution. So when I met with Dr. Randhawa for the first time, and I had already read about everything, but when he explained it again, there's nothing else to say but this totally makes sense. And also, again, like you guys were saying, I don't think I truly believed it until I saw it, until I saw these kids who had stories about touching peanut butter and blowing up in hives, and watching them in front of my eyes eat 75 peanuts and talk about how their lives have changed because of it. It's just truly an honor to be here and be a part of these people's journeys, and be a part of medicine that's actually making a difference and making a change in such a small amount of time. I know it's a huge commitment being in our program and putting the time and effort while you're in active treatment, but you can go your whole life without having any change in this condition. So that commitment of time is really an investment for life.
Thanks, Mia. I think one of the most common questions I get asked is, do I still see patients? And the honest answer is, I don't really see a lot of patients anymore in regards to food anaphylaxis. I still process and look at every single data set. Our machines and our AI continuously improve and build, but it's a human operation to push that through. But in the end, it was never an easy decision to walk away from seeing a lot of patients. That's the whole reason why I do this. But I needed individuals who are committed to the mission. And the three folks you're getting to meet here today are absolutely committed to the mission and making sure that your child has a safe and positive experience. Again, it takes time. It takes people the willingness to go through the process, see what the outcomes really look like, and not to see it across one or two kids, but hundreds and thousands of kids, and then that validates the system even more. So I'm going to take one first question here. The question is from one anonymous parent, apparently, who says, asking, my son is currently 8 months old and is 8 months old and should be 18 months old, apparently, when they come off the wait list. Allergic to peanuts, milk, eggs. I know this is on the younger end of the program. What is the experience generally in this kind of toddler age group? So I'll maybe defer that to Dr. Clark.
Okay. So as far as age, 18 months is kind of where a lot of people will decide to start. We have had our youngest patient down. We actually were just talking about this, is our youngest patient was 9 months of age. I think the challenging part with the younger kids is getting them to eat some of these foods. So in a lot of ways, I feel like one of the things that makes a family successful, no matter what age they start, whether it's 18 or somewhere between a year to 2 years or even older is how willing, how are they good eaters? What is their relationship with food and their parents? And are the parents willing to be creative, because it does take a creative patient or parent to get through some of these foods and to get their child to eat some of these things. It's even parents that aren't in food allergy or treating for food allergy sometimes have a hard time feeding their 18-month-old kid anyways. So good eaters are important. I do think on the plus side of starting at a young age is that they haven't yet, had an experience. They're going to forget a lot of that part of it. So a lot of the testing and the symptoms, they won't remember that as they get older, and we'll actually be able to treat them through that.
Great, thank you very much. The next question here is, what is SoCal Food Allergy's definition of cross-contamination? I've heard of patients going through cross-contamination safely before they clear a food. Absolutely, I mean, so remember, the program here addresses all food groups. That's, milk, eggs, grain, all grains, all tree nuts, peanuts, seeds. It's a complicated thing to really understand all the phylogenetics that's involved in those discussion points, but that's what we do. That's what big data does. And so when we're able to define these, we can actually understand the amount of protein exposure that's necessary to understand what a grade 1 reaction looks like. And we know that when a patient is well above that grade 1 reaction threshold, we deem them cross-contamination risk-free. So indeed, if you are allergic to a bunch of tree nuts, you don't have to clear every single tree nut completely. You can actually get to a certain amount of tree nut exposure, and then you don't have to read labels anymore for tree nuts. We have same definitions for peanut, milk, eggs, et cetera. So that's actually a very good question. It's a very accurate statement. So I'm going to hop off the question wagon here for a second and ask Mia, what's an example of where, the process that's been building here for the last number of years focused on patient safety, where you have taken a big lead on this, how we handle kind of the on-call support, calls in the middle of the night, and how you resolve those cases. Why don't you tell us your experience of how that's gone?
Yeah, so we have definitely been putting a lot of emphasis on safety. That's the main thing that we want to guarantee you while you're here, is that you will have a safe experience. So a lot of training has gone into new providers, new support staff that are going to be who you come in contact with if you have any issues with the treatment program as you go through. So we have opened up our command center where you have 24/7 support. You can make a phone call and you will get a provider on call on the other end of the line. When these issues come in, you are going to initially come in contact with the provider on call, but if this issue is something that's more complex, your lead, pod lead is going to be linked in on this. So the person who's seeing your patient, your child in clinic, who knows your situation, who knows your story, is going to also be supporting you at home as well. We've been collecting a lot of data around reactions and looking at this as a whole, and that all feeds back into the information to make plans in the future.
So one of the common questions that we get asked, or I'd say is out there, but maybe it doesn't get asked directly, is if we're doing about, let's call it, 1,200, 1,300 challenges a week, what is the average number of reactions that are happening in total numbers per week in amongst that 1,300, 1,400 challenge?
Yeah. So every week we look at that data, and last week it was 2. So every week we present that data and look at it and look at each of those individual cases. So we're seeing anywhere from 2 to 5 reactions. Some weeks we have 0. We celebrate those weeks. But that's generally what we're looking at.
And those reactions are largely managed as grade 1 reactions. They are itchy tongue, abdominal symptoms, et cetera, which are often managed just with either nothing or very minimal medication like Benadryl. So thank you. One of the questions that was asked earlier was in regards to a disaster plan, meaning like if there's some sort of natural disaster in our area here, how do we handle those things? I'd actually go back to March of 2020 when the pandemic initially hit, and all of the efforts that took place in trying to extend and organize patients' plans. Dr. Clark, if you want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I would definitely think that that was a natural disaster of sorts. I think that it affected everybody in our program, both locally, East Coast, and internationally. And even though we know nowhere in medicine have we ever seen something so significant, we were still able to keep our doors open, keep functioning, keep supporting those patients that were in the middle of cycles who either couldn't travel or were, borders were closed and they weren't allowed to travel. So that was, I would definitely say, a large feat. And we definitely learned a lot from that so that we have a better backup system, better plans, better support. I know that last year was probably, we went through and called all of our international patients, which was a lot of phone calls because they were stuck because of the borders. But I would say that was a great learning experience. Everything that we do here is a rolling quality improvement QI project. Every time that we run into something new, it's all about improving what we do, how we do it, how to make it safer or faster or more efficient. So we definitely are ready for that and are planning for backup systems that will help us if that were to occur again, because it could happen again, and it could happen in a more of a cyclical basis depending on how this fall goes. And vaccines, we are all vaccinated here. So we've all gotten our vaccines here, so we're all fully vaccinated, and hoping that everyone else will be soon too.
Thank you. There's a question regarding 9-month-old twins, where one states identical twins, where one child reacted to peanuts, the other did not. That's assuming they actually exposed the other twin to peanuts. Should I avoid giving it to both? That's a very complicated question. I would define your question around what are called concordance studies. There are very few concordance studies done on identical twins in food allergy. The anticipation from old concordance data is somewhere around the 35 to 40% mark risk of food allergies, meaning if one twin has it, the other one has about a third, 30% to 40% risk of developing food anaphylaxis. So it's a tough thing with very young kids. I would advise get some testing done before you make a decision to continue feeding another twin. Another question that is posed here is asking about a brief explanation of kind of the science behind the program. It sounds like this is coming from a doctor, because you want to explain to potential patients in the community. Where would you get information that you want to relay to folks? Dr. Ripp, what are your thoughts on that question?
So to answer the question about the brief science behind this program, we do look a lot about our patients' data and do data analytics. I think one big thing that's different about our program versus OIT, for example, is that we use a lot of biosimilars or foods with very similar proteins, which makes sense in my point. I don't want to start a patient on their most anaphylactic food and just hope that they won't have a reaction. Some kids do well, some kids don't. By conditioning the body with biosimilar proteins, we're able to get your body to a point where they're better able to tolerate their most anaphylactic foods. And so on the day that they're actually eating their most anaphylactic foods, they shouldn't have any symptoms, and they can achieve a state of tolerance that way.
Thank you. I'd say our website has quite a bit of good information, even for medical providers to extend out to the community. Another question here, and I think there's a series of questions regarding EOE or eosinophilic esophagitis. I'll try to answer that in maybe 20 seconds. Remember that EOE is a kind of a new diagnosis in a way. EOE, as it's called, was first diagnosed in adults in the 1990s. We started seeing some pediatric cases, at least based on that, in about 2008, 2009. If you took 100 EOE patients, only 10% of them would actually have food anaphylaxis. The number's probably even smaller than that, frankly. So when we deal with EOE with food anaphylaxis, because I want to be really clear, that's the only cases that we deal with. We only treat kids who have food anaphylaxis. We have to look at those cases specifically, their endotype specifically, and we have to normalize their inflammation in their gut. And we have to really identify their immune system that's driving that inflammation. So we have quite a bit of success dealing with it. They are a complex group, but remember that EOE in and of itself is a very naive state of research. And we work very closely with GI doctors here on the West Coast. And we also work with GI doctors across the country to achieve good outcomes. We've had great success in getting these kids who have EOE and anaphylaxis into the state of remission from anaphylaxis. As regards to their EOE, we've also had great outcomes with their EOE going into states of resolution. I refrain from saying remission because we don't even have a definition of remission for EOE. So what does that mean? It means that we all live with some eosinophils in our esophagus. That happens all the time. In fact, people with allergies can have up-down swings of eosinophils in their esophagus throughout their entire life. So I don't quite know what a definition of remission is. From that standpoint, the long-term risk of EOE is chronic inflammation causing scarring that would require dilation, and it causes difficulty with swallowing long-term. There's no evidence that it causes long-term cancer risk or anything of that nature. So I'd say overall, that's a work in progress. Very happy with the results that we're seeing so far. And it's one of our areas that we are continuing to push a lot of R&D into to get even better outcomes. Next question is, how do you convince older kids who have been taught to avoid the allergen at all costs to enter into treatment? It's a great question because older kids certainly do look at this a little differently. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, this is definitely a big shift, and we talk about this a lot with our patients. The identity change that you have when you are going from being the kid with food allergies to getting to a point where you can eat all of these. The fear that you have, you've been told to avoid all of these things, and now you're starting to eat them, and you feel every little thing. You feel that little bit of itch, and it's hard to move to the next step and progress. We definitely work closely with other support staff. The same way we work with GI doctors for EOE, we work with psychiatrists and therapists for patients that need extra support while they go through this program. We also supply some of that support here. We have groups that form naturally, patients that are similar ages that talk to each other and connect and work through this together. We also try to have those conversations every time that you're in the office for challenges. I like to ask patients when they come in, are you worried about this challenge today? So we get it out in the open so we can talk about those things and explain away some of those fears that they have and talk to them about how this is different than other experiences they might have had before with food allergy treatment.
Thank you very much. There's a common question we get in our events here, which is what is the difference between TIP and OIT? This is really well described in many other video series as well as on our website. I will answer that just again very, very clearly. OIT has been attempted really historically for decades. Since the 1960s, various types and forms of oral-based immunotherapies have been attempted and failed. OIT has been attempted aggressively since the late 1990s, and we to date have only one product on the market that is even attempting a full-scale version of OIT, and it has significant limitations. TIP, again, is all data-based. We're looking at hundreds of trillions of data points to cross-match immune systems across plant proteins and animal proteins. There is a clear sequence of logic that's based on the understanding if we can cross-match people's immune systems to proteins in a safe way through pre-treatment, conditioning, tolerance induction, and remission, when the patient achieves that state of initial tolerance, they're actually eating large amounts of these proteins. So meaning, if you look at the peanut pill as an example, the maximum amount of peanut intake, which you achieve after a year or longer of trying to build up with all types of powders and so forth, is, if you're lucky, 1 to 2 peanuts. And we don't know what that looks like long-term for those patients. Here we have 15 years of data on patients who actually eat peanuts at 75 peanuts, 60 peanuts, and when they drop down to 2 and 3 week cycles, 150 peanut challenges, which is pretty remarkable. And we can do that all based on molecular data. So it's a wholly different approach across the science behind it. It's a wholly different approach when it comes down to the concept of remission, and that's the biggest difference that I would say. One general question for our group is about, which goes into one of the questions here, is like, what exactly is food freedom for these kids? Again, I think that to me is again, I'm a scientist, so I like words like remission. That's a more appropriate term. But from a patient experience standpoint, what do you think food freedom is, in 10 seconds, each, because we have a lot of questions here.
I would say that we like to describe food freedom as the ability to eat large amounts of these proteins irregularly or on a varying basis and still maintain safety. I will say that that may not be what food freedom means to most of the kids, though. Some of them may enjoy eating some of the foods, but it's not necessarily the food itself for some of them. It's what it allows them to do with their life. Everything in most cultures revolves around food. So it's not necessarily I love eating this food and that's the freedom I get. It's the freedom to live their life, to be able to travel, to be able to join in on all those events in life, birthday parties, weddings. Everything revolves around food. And it's that safety for them that is the freedom that I think they get.
I was going to add to that. I feel like, especially during the onboarding visit, which is the visit that families come in and we're getting a really detailed food intake history. A lot of times we'll be asking about, the foods, what they're eating, and families oftentimes will say like, we don't eat out. I cook everything. We can't eat out. And so that I think is a huge, that definition of food freedom, being able to go to a restaurant. A lot of times when patients are doing their tolerance visit, 1 or 2 or even remission visits, that's the huge thing. I have parents tell me, as soon as COVID's over, we're gonna go to Southeast Asia and not worry about anything. So I feel like that definitely is a huge definition of food freedom for a lot of families.
Absolutely. Just what you both said, and just a quick story from a patient. There was a girl here the other day that did her 75 peanuts, and she doesn't love peanuts, but she was telling me about the date that she went on at Cheesecake Factory the night before, and she's, that was one of her first few times there. So it's really all of the opportunities in life that you don't have to fear this food anymore, what that opens up for them. And seeing a patient eat a slice of bread for the first time,
There's nothing more.
There's nothing more exciting than that. So.
Thank you very much. A question about EpiPens. The question is asking, after completing treatment, after going into year 1 remission, do you still have to carry an EpiPen? Have any children graduated and relapsed and experienced anaphylaxis? I've answered this question before many different ways. Remember that we have a report card on your child. Every year we are checking their data. We know what their molecular markers look like. So really the question becomes, how often can we do that check? As long as you're eating a once-a-week cycle or every 2-week cycle of all your primary allergens, as is directed by the data, your child's not going to relapse into anaphylaxis, period. We have not seen that. That does not happen. As long as they're achieving sequential remission. That's what we're looking for based on proper molecular markers. However, we have had some kids who have kind of gone a little rogue. They've gone, and stopped eating certain things. Often this is an issue, I think, more around having the experience of cooking or going to various restaurants and so forth, and they may miss a period of time. We have data that shows that even if post-remission, you're missing 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months of exposure. That's a long time to not eat something, that they won't go and have a reaction. I've had patients as long as 11 months. Now, again, I will not encourage that type of behavior, but they can miss many, many months and not go back into anaphylaxis. So I do think there's quite a bit of wiggle room, but the reality is we are a highly regulated research cohort that is existing here, which means we have 2 things by the book. So until we have, I'd say, real optimal data and we can trust human behavior, we're still going to ask people to carry their EpiPen. At some point down the road, maybe that will change, but that's going to require much more work. Next question is about long distance patients coming from the East Coast or New York. What has your experience been seeing these patients who fly in from, everywhere practically? What is different about their treatment? What's different about their experience?
I will say that we have, I don't want to leave anybody out, but we do have patients that come from the East Coast, from Australia, Canada, throw in Bulgaria there. We have patients that come from great distances to be a part of our program and treatment. The differences as far as treatment is that we will, because they're coming from long distances, we're trying to maximize their time while they're here. So their plans may have several different foods running simultaneously over a longer period of time. I would say on average, it's every 3 months, 2 to 3 months that they come back to do their next set and rotate. It is hard to manage some of the patients from a distance, but I will say that those families are definitely the most resourceful, knowledgeable, hardworking. It's a hard job. It's a hard program to feed these foods on a daily basis, but they do it well. And I think that makes them very successful in our program.
Thank you. So another question is regarding expansion, and I will answer that question in a few minutes with some more detail. But I would encourage folks who are always interested in our expansion to understand how this organization is built and how it grows. There is no organization like this in medicine, period. And I say that not only as somebody who has experience working in all different sectors of healthcare. I manage, very large enterprises in the healthcare industry. We currently are even looking at the opportunity to grow this organization with the concept of impact investors. And interestingly enough, these individuals also grossly struggle with understanding what happens here. So why is it so hard to understand that? Because this is not just a clinic. This is a tech company. This is a software company. That is first and foremost what we are. We also happen to be a healthcare company, and how we are hooked together is very, very unique because it is the tech and software side that builds the data sets, that sources all the database, and it's the health side that has to provide manufacturing of proteins, safety, the diagnostics, and so forth. So this is a very complicated organization. It's important to hear that because in order to expand, we will not expand unless we can do it safely. We have to have safety first. So we have certain steps occurring here in the next 6 months that will basically beta test the safety as we get to further and further distance from our headquarters. If the data looks good and we have consistency in individuals, signing up on the wait list, coming off the wait list, hopefully continue to see support as a 501c3 nonprofit as well from donors. If we can see all that happen, we can certainly look at expanding potentially late this year or early part of next year. Location is going to be dependent on the safety effect of that beta test. So that's kind of the short answer on that side. Another question here is regarding improvement in other allergic diathesis, so other conditions, allergies including eczema, ocular allergies, and asthma. So what has been the experience of patients who have anaphylaxis and those other things in this program? Mia, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you hear about the allergic triad a lot. I'm sure a lot of you experience that with your own children. So it's important to address all of those as we're going through TIP. We have a great support here of being connected to TPIRC, another clinic that we're associated with, and they have pulmonologists, we have immunologists, we've got a whole team there that if you're experiencing those other conditions, they can help get those under control so we can continue through TIP safely. And it's great to have that connection within our clinic. We can go back and forth and work on plans together. But generally, as we see patients go through treatment, those other things improve as well. So you might start with eczema, and as you progress through treatment, you're seeing that all clearing up. We're seeing things heal from the inside out. So it's exciting to see, parents are excited about the food allergy side of it, but seeing their skin, a year later in this time, that's always terrible for them. They're like, you know what, this isn't what it was like last year. How did this happen? And all these things that we're doing, it's great for food, but it's also really helpful for the rest of their health.
Thank you. After completing the program, are you still considered allergic to those foods? So if you're allergic to peanuts and you're anaphylactic to peanuts previously, and you pass the 75 peanuts challenge, your molecular markers are where they should be, are you still considered allergic or anaphylactic? Answer is no, otherwise you would not be in remission. So what do you do in those cases? Well, unfortunately, because we still mandate carrying the EpiPen, we let those folks know that you should basically tell folks that you've been treated for peanut anaphylaxis, you're in a state of remission, but this program asks you to carry an EpiPen. And that usually works out pretty well. There's no limits, no restrictions. You can have as much peanut brittle, as much any sort of peanut product you want. We actually have a handful of patients here who are the children of peanut farmers. Imagine that. So they're from Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and they can go, go back into the family business now because they can go not only handle the peanuts, but they can sure enjoy them as well. So I'm going to jump off the primary questions here for a second in regards to, perhaps just tell us a story about a impactful patient, somebody you've seen, a case you've dealt with that kind of stays with you, something we all see in healthcare all the time. Dr. Clark.
I think some of the patients that I've seen, or at least the one that sticks in my mind the most, was a patient that had a food allergy that was coming in, a very young kid coming in to get a food challenge. And I remember how traumatized not the kid was, but the family was from their past experiences, from reactions that had happened in the past. And I think for me, that really stuck with me because you could see in the parents' face and in their posture, like they had white knuckles, their pupils were dilated. I mean, they were scared for their child. And I remember that, and then doing well with that challenge, even though they'd had some struggles, and then seeing them later come back, fully able to eat all those things. And like the night and day difference, going from where they were to where they are now and watching that journey. And watching them come full circle into being able to enjoy those foods and the changes that it made and the difference it made in the parents and how relieved they were was like, it was palpable.
You guys have a story that's similar?
I think not a specific patient, but there are a lot of patients that will come in for a challenge and the parent will tell me like, this is the first food that they had a reaction to, and now they're challenging it. And there is a sense of fear, but also a sense of excitement once their child has eaten that food and gets on the trampoline and starts jumping up and down. And so I think like in those moments, a lot of times I'll like pull up the patient snap chart just to kind of see like how far we've come, how like a lot of their hard work has paid off, and we're just going to keep going until the end. And I think again, it's that message of hope, like, seeing your child go through a reaction is absolutely devastating, and to watch your child eat 10 grams of a certain protein and jump up and down in front of you and then not have a reaction, I think is very, very significant.
Yeah, absolutely. One patient I'm thinking of in particular, they did have a reaction on a peanut updose in clinic. And, these happen every now and then. We have these with some patients. And this family was nervous and they were like, should we just quit? Is this not going to work for her? Are we that 0.01% who can't make it? And, it took a lot of, this happened and we are going to get through this. And encouraging them to kind of trust and continue to entrust their child's care with us. And just a few weeks ago, she was back in here and passed her final challenge. And from that point that we saw them, a couple months before when they had that reaction to passing that final challenge, they were just expressing like, I'm so happy we stuck with it. I'm so happy that we didn't give up then. I'm so happy that our past experiences didn't cloud this and that we were all able to get to that next point together. And she was dancing around, she's a big dancer, and we actually had labs on her from very recently, right before her final challenge, and seeing her numbers, her IgEs go from over 100 to, she was, I think it was 12 was her number at that point. It's amazing for us to see. We love that they can eat it all, but I think it's always amazing to see the numbers that change, that you don't generally see your IgE change ever, and seeing it change that dramatically in that period of time. You know, it was exciting to see her life change, her actual numbers change. So we love being a part of all of that.
Speaking of test results, one question is in regards to how often you have to get testing. As I mentioned earlier, it is an annual basis. To be frank, if I could test every patient every 3 months, even better. But this is obviously financially a huge burden for this organization. Remember that we run one of the very few level 3 high complexity labs in the nation. It's really only us and Johns Hopkins in the entire nation. And we have, you know, basically held that burden financially for our patients. We understand some of it obviously goes to the patient themselves, but it is something that we are continuing to work on. And I think as we continue to streamline and hit certain volume, that will continue to get better. We already paid some of that forward recently, as you will see in the next number of months, where some of the costs that's out of pocket towards labs is even being reduced even further. But that annual remission, the annual set of labs is critical because that is the report card on your child. We will know very well how they're doing, how safe they're being, how compliant they are, and how, more importantly, how much we can reduce the frequency of those foods even more. It's nice to go from once a week to every 2 weeks. It's nice to go from every 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and so forth. Another question here is a great question because we haven't really announced this in a big enough way yet. There will be more coming on it, but it's asking about the pods. Can you explain this pod structure that has gone live now for several months? And I will hand it off to Mia because she's the one who is in charge of all the pods.
All right. So for those of you who are coming in for treatment, you might have sort of noticed some changes in scheduling. What we have created are these pods. The pods are groups of providers and medical assistants that you will be seeing at each visit with your child. The reason we did this is because we are growing, and we find that patients' experiences are better when you know the person you're coming to see. And like we referenced before, if there's issues on call or at home, we connect you back with this group. So basically, we want to give you a home. We want you to feel like you are known when you come in for this journey. It's fun to celebrate not just your milestones in here, but outside of there. So that connection and relationship is great, and then it also increases our safety as well. So we have 13 providers that are divided between 3 different pods at this point. So you'll be seeing one of those providers when you come in for your clinic visits, and we'll continue that relationship as we go.
Thank you. The next question is, what makes SoCal food allergy treatment different? Again, really going back to the OIT question. I'm going to answer it in a little differently because obviously, you know, it's different across many different levels. But think of it this way: if you go do OIT, you know, the doctor there will essentially follow a dilution-based protocol with no regard to test results if they test at all. So if a patient has a peanut value of 80 or 85, they treat that patient the same as a peanut value of 10. And they just start and they go until the patient has a reaction or not, and they get to a certain point, and they're eating a very small amount of peanut every day for the rest of their life. We would never do such a thing. Everything here is based on data. So as alluded to earlier, by the time we actually start peanut on a patient, the objective is to cross-match enough epitope sequences where their peanut numbers have gone from 80 down to 40, and then we start peanut exposure. And that is the key difference. We will not do things blindly. And by doing so, it has resulted in a program that has really an incredibly high success rate, and it also drives the patients into a state of remission. Next question is about wheat allergy. Given that you just had a wheat allergy patient today, why don't you talk a little bit about wheat allergy, why it's complicated, and you know, the question here is it's one of the most difficult ones to treat. What are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. So the wheat allergy patients that we see, it has the largest amount of proteins. So everyone's plan is a little bit different because some are more allergic to one type of protein and some are more allergic to a different type of protein. So it's really important that we're conditioning properly in order to treat that protein that they're more allergic to. So there are a lot of different forms of wheat. that will go through with the treatment, and it requires a lot of testing to see, are we conditioning properly? Are we seeing the drops that we need to? So it definitely is a journey to go through the wheat process, but people get there. It takes time, it takes patience. You get to cross-contamination points, and that takes a huge burden off of families. But we'll definitely use different forms of wheat to make sure we're cross-matching all of those proteins in wheat as we go through.
Next question is about, other than following the recommended foods, which we obviously declare very clearly per each case, do other types of dietary preferences like meat intake contribute to certain success in the program? Clark.
I think that depends on what your allergy profile is. Certain meat intake may be helpful for those patients that have certain allergies versus others. So it does depend on your child's individual allergens, severity of allergens, and how much meat could contribute to that.
Thank you. Next question is about why some patients go on SLIT and why some don't, and how that's helpful towards treatment of their food allergies. Dr. Ripp.
So we do have quite a few patients who are on SLIT, which stands for sublingual immunotherapy. And the reason for that is because some patients, their environmental allergens also influence or trigger their food allergies. Because if you think about it, you know, we eat walnuts, peanuts, pecans, pistachios. Our human species have decided to eat these environmental allergens, but we don't eat acorns. You know, we've just decided that we want to eat these nuts instead. Again, going back to the biosimilarity of proteins and how we use those proteins to help treat our food allergies, SLIT is a concoction of environmental allergens, trees, grasses, pollens, danders, dust mites. Interesting fact is, you know, peanut has a lot of cross-reactivity with some of the grasses like Timothy grass and Johnson grass. So instead of having kids eat a bowl of grass, it's probably going to be easier to do a sublingual spray. But we will only put patients on SLIT if it will help their food allergies. So we will do data analysis, look and see if they do have any environmental allergies that will help treat their food allergies, and those patients will be candidates for SLIT therapy.
Thank you. Next question is, where can I see where I am on the wait list? Unfortunately, we have changed the way we run our wait list to make it actually much more, I would say much more streamlined is a more appropriate term. And we are trying to make sure that patients, especially with the pandemic still going on, that have options where if they're local, that we can kind of cast a wider net of recruitment of patients, not to push anybody to the back of the line, but given that, you know, with restrictions around travel, that we could bring certain people who are local in sooner. So at some point we might have a number on the wait list. Right now, people who are signing up on the wait list probably will be called off the wait list anywhere between 9 to 10 months. It could be a little longer depending on how quickly we grow. But remember, our goal is to not have a wait list. If we can expand effectively and quickly enough, we shouldn't have to have certainly a long wait list at all. So that is our long-term strategy. In regards to why some patients require more visits to clear the same allergies, I will just explain that in short terms. Milk is an example of a protein that has well over 20 different epitope sequences. So if you have a patient who's anaphylactic to a large number of the casein derivatives or a large number of the whey derivatives, they're going to require a significant number of these conditioning treatment regimens versus somebody who has maybe only 3 or 4. And so the duration of treatment, again, is all based on data that's gathered from a patient's testing results that we run here in-house. And we will only treat those patients effectively. We're not going to hit the gas, go faster. Although we have the data analytics, we have the applied math, the vector analysis to understand that we can do that. We want safety first. So there are very rare occasions, like if a kid's going away to college in the next year, where sometimes we'll actually have to go a little bit faster. But otherwise, we really try to do this as short a period of time as possible, but to do it in a way that actually gets them to the finish line safely. So I'm going to finish here with one last question, and then I will open it up to our team here. How does your testing quantify if a patient is sensitive versus anaphylactic to a specific protein? And why isn't that type of testing available more broadly? So I'm going to hand the first part of that question over to our team just from their experience, and then I will answer the question about the availability of testing. Dr. Clark.
Okay, so when we are looking at your child's immune system, we want to look at as a whole. We want to get as much information about how their body responds to these proteins in as many ways as we can. So you'll notice that we do a lot of different testing. So looking at the blood test, looking at the skin prick test, looking at the patch test, we're looking at it from as many different angles to collect as much information as we can so that we can actually provide a safe and therapeutic way to treat your child.
Yep. Any other add-ons to that?
No,
She nailed it. She nailed it.
I'll add on to the question of availability. So again, and just to be really clear, there's approximately 80 tests that we run in-house that are determined as LDTs, or a very specific type of test that's simply not available anywhere else. So these types of tests, which are, again, reagent derived and based and built, and I certainly played my role in developing those over the years here, those are critical because we look at one single food and we look at it from at least 5 different angles. And that's not 5 tests, that's 5 angles. There's many tests in some of those angles. So that type of testing is simply not available at Quest or LabCorp or other places. And if we don't have complete data on patients, how can we accurately use that data to prescriptively and predictively know how to treat your child? So it's unfortunate and it's difficult, but again, a lot of what we do here is cutting edge. A lot of what we do here is simply very, very complex. I'm very proud of the work that's been done here. I hope you've enjoyed meeting some of our team, and I'm going to ask our team as we close to kind of answer one question, which is, if you wanted parents to know one thing about this program before they come into the program, just something general, what is it you'd want them to know? And I'll go first. The one thing I'd want every parent to know before coming here is that this is your choice. We don't sell this. This is something that you have to want to do. We are here to help you. We will do it safely. We'll do it effectively. We've had now for 15 plus years. But at the same time, we have 6-8 million kids out there with food anaphylaxis. Is every single person a candidate? Sure, they technically are. Do they want to do it? That's a different story. So I think it's important that you have that discussion with your family, with your loved ones, with your child in the program if they're old enough, because if you have the whole team behind it, it goes much, much farther.
I would say, going along with that, is that I would want them to know that it isn't a cakewalk. It is a lot of work. I do want to be honest about that. There are challenges. I think on Facebook, people like to post all the wins, but they don't post necessarily all the struggles. But what I would want you to know is that we are here as a team to help you through those struggles. And if you're willing to put in the work to help on that side, we're going to be right here with you on our side to keep you on track.
Mm-hmm. For the parents of young kids, I wanted to say, I want you to know that kids will surprise you. So kids are resilient, they do well in the program. We often, a lot of parents will usually ask me, like, what do I do with my picky eater? And they will surprise you. So if you are thinking about this program, I think it's worth to give your child a chance to let them surprise you.
That's a good one. I think going off sort of what Dr. Clark was talking about, it is a big commitment. It's an investment in so many different ways of your time, your finances, your energy. So I would say that this commitment is intensive during your active treatment, but the payoffs in your long-term, looking back 5, 10, 15 years from now, how your life can be different is really what there is to look forward to, and the hope that comes with a place like this.
Great, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. You spent the last hour with us. We will be having another live event in March, specifically on Tuesday, March 16th, focused specifically on COVID update around vaccinations and kind of how we're going to deploy that, especially across our patients who have food allergies, as I'm sure you'll all have some questions around that. And as we go further throughout the year, our goal is to share with you as much of the behind the scenes of this organization as possible. For those who've been here, you see it work, but you don't see the endless hours of work that's done by hundreds and hundreds of individuals. And I would certainly like to take the time over the next year to let you see that, so you have a true appreciation for the depth of what happens here. With that, I wish you a great day and I wish you well. Thank you and see you next time.